I'm back on the air. I don't know whether anyone is watching. Sorry about that. I don't really know what happened. Hang on. Let's see. Let me let the person know that I was offline, then I'm back online, and then I will continue with the show. Okay, there we go. So I want to talk about something a little different now. I want to talk about a scientist. Oh, no, before we move into that, I have to talk about John Brennan. This fellow doesn't seem to be worried about anything. He should be, but such is the nature of arrogance. Yeah, and we're back. Okay, hello, Metal Mike, Dan Allison, Emmett Kelly's Earth, etc. Glitch in the Matrix, says David Wright. Yeah, I was having some difficulty with memory on my computer earlier today, which I do not understand for the life of me, because there's plenty of memory in this computer, and it's a fast computer, and I have fast output on the internet. There shouldn't be any of these problems, but there you go. This is from Thomas Lifeson at American Thinker. To be honest, I didn't watch the much hyped interview of former CIA chief and now CNN contributor John Brennan by Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. I detest both men and did not want to vomit on the TV or floor. But my thanks go out to those like Bonchi of Red State who did the job This American and other former Fox News viewers refused to do. Tom Elliott, the founder of Grabbian, tweeted out video of the lie. Quote, "The Steele Dossier was not used in any way to undergird the judgments that came out of the intelligence community assessment about the Russian actions in the 2016 election." Julie Kelly of American Greatness tweeted out the proof of the obvious lie, the work of Catherine Herridge of CBS News. John Brennan lied to Chris Wallace that the dossier had nothing to do with ICA. No pushback from Wallace. And there's pictures of papers here proving him wrong. There are many things not debatable in relation to the Russia investigation. One of those things is that the Steele dossier was used to help bolster some of the claims made in Brennan's 2017 intelligence report, a document that laid the groundwork for the targeting of Trump before the dossier became public. We have undeniable proof that it happened, that Brennan was aware of the dossier, and that, in fact, many of the most serious claims about collusion and Putin wanting Trump to win had their roots in the dossier. There was no other evidence of anything Brennan and his handpicked stooges said in the ICA about Trump and Russia. Wallace knows all that, yet when given the opportunity to challenge Brennan, he simply passes. That's a trend we've seen with Wallace while he was interviewing Nancy Pelosi in the past and while he was questioning Joe Biden during the debate. When it comes time for the Fox News anchor to be tough on a Democrat, he takes a pass nearly every single time. Yeah, you remember when the media was saying that Trump was a pawn of Vladimir Putin, and that Russia stole the 2016 election, and this was going to be proved. This word traitor was applied to Donald Trump on a regular basis, once for a whole week, because he'd met with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. Apparently there's some people, foreign rulers, that the president of the United States can't meet. Well, Reagan met Gorbachev, and Nixon met Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, but that was different somehow. John Brennan, he admits it. He's spoken about this at length. In 1976, in the presidential election, he voted for the candidate of the Communist Party of the United States. Communist Party of the United States. Why isn't this brought up on a regular basis? Because it seems a very odd thing for any American to have done in 1976. Keep in mind, this was 20 years after Khrushchev's secret speech. It was 15 years after the Berlin Wall went up. 8 years after the crushing of the Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia. Solzhenitsyn had been published extensively at this time, and the works of other Soviet dissidents were well known, but John Brennan voted for the Communist Party of the United States. So, William Briggs has a piece today. Sick Siegel says, bend over and take the experimental vaccine or be kicked out of society. Fear is the mind killer, as it has been rightly said, and to hysterical, there is no misspelling, minds gripped and wrecked by irrational fear, the unquenchable desire to demand and mandate others share that fear, and you have Ethan Siegel, and many like him. Sick Siegel writes for the left-wing political tract Scientific American. He says, opting out of vaccines should opt you out of American society. He doesn't say if this opting out means being forced into gulags or concentration camps, but being a scientist, he's probably open to evidence and willing to choose the option that most efficiently removes the unclean from the earth. Sick Siegel says, although you have a right to your own body, your choice to willfully be sick ends where another's right to be healthy begins. Did you hear that argument around the time of AIDS? Because I very much did not hear that argument. I heard the argument that to do the opposite was wicked. Contact tracing. Mandatory contact tracing? No. That will send people underground. So we can't have that. And of course, AIDS killed a fair number of people in the United States and a fair number of young people in the United States as well. William Briggs continues, how do we best tell Sick Siegel that people don't willfully choose to be sick by the corona doom, that it comes upon most quickly and vanishes just as quickly, that for most the disease is quite mild, even unnoticeable? We cannot tell him. He will not hear. Science has declared finality on this subject and many other subjects, no new evidence. Dispute belongs only to deniers. Some do willfully, at least wantonly, choose to be sick or expose themselves to other illnesses and causes of death. Sick Siegel must condemn these people to, and for the sake of consistency, force them to opt out of society. True, there will be loud screams of homophobia once Sick Siegel bans sodomy, which exposes those who partake in it to HIV and thus AIDS, also to other venereal disease, especially gonorrhea and syphilis. And there's no vaccine for AIDS. Sodomy kills. People who insist on having it must be opted out of American society. Bug chasers must be particularly condemned. And with that, I'm wholly with Siegel. Bug chasers are a thing that exist. It sounds fantastic, but you can look it up. Sick Siegel says there's no moral difference between a drunk driver and a willfully unvaccinated person. He errs. It's not just drunk drivers, but all drivers who might kill. Driving exposes you to death. You might kill or be killed if you willfully choose to drive. There's no vaccine against driving, even for sober drivers. About 40,000 people every single year are killed by driving in the USA alone, a majority of whom are young and vigorous. The cause is not methylated, but high spirits. Their lives could be saved if driving is vaccinated against in the form of banning it. Drivers who refuse to not drive must be opted out of American society. Flu is deadlier than corona doom historically. The doom is beating flu in the body bag count this year, yes, but don't count flu out. It and its tag team partner pneumonia will battle back and kill again more than the corona doom could ever think of killing. Flu is worse than the doom. Sick Siegel will surely, this is no slippery slope argument or sarcastic exaggeration, require all get the flu vaccine as well. He doesn't mention flu because he is not now terrified of flu, but give him time. He will be. Everybody must be made to pay Big Pharma whatever fee our most beneficent government determines is fair. Everyone must ignore the actual risk of the diseases Sick Siegel and his merry band of banners list. Everybody must suffer whatever side effects the vaccine has. Pfizer says, quote, women of childbearing age should be advised to avoid pregnancy for at least 2 months after their second dose, unquote, dose of their corona doom vaccine. Women of childbearing age, roughly 13 to 50, that is tens of millions of women. You know what we're going to get? from the Pfizer vaccine. It's not really a vaccine, but never mind. We are going to get a big abortion spike everywhere in the world that this vaccine is administered. But there's a lot of people out there who love abortion, love it to death, one might say. So who is Ethan Siegel? Well, he was born in 1978, and he's described by Wikipedia as an American theoretical astrophysicist and science writer who studies Big Bang Theory. Nothing there about epidemiology or disease. In the past, he's been a professor at Lewis and Clark College and a blogger at Starts With a Bang on science blogs and also on Forbes.com since 2016. He was born in 1978 to a Jewish postal worker and grew up in the Bronx, where he attended Bronx High School of Science. He graduated from Northwestern University in 2000 with a triple degree, including in physics, and went on to earn his PhD in astrophysics from the University of Florida. He is a strange man, to put it mildly. Personal life. Siegel lived in Florida from 2008 and has lived in Toledo, Washington since 2014. He is married to Jamie Cummings, who he met in Madison, Wisconsin. I did some research on this. Jamie, of course, is a man's name. It is a diminutive of Hamish, which is the Scottish form of James. I don't want to misgender this person, but from what I could tell, female pronouns were used regarding this person, but that doesn't really tell us much these days. He has a large beard and mustache and wears a kilt. With Jamie, he entered the West Coast Beard and Mustache competition in Portland in 2011. Does Jamie have a beard and mustache? He is often asked why he doesn't look like a scientist. Siegel is Jewish and an atheist. He plays online chess and is a fan of My Little Pony. Yeah, that's perfectly normal for an adult to do. And so I went to his Twitter account, and it's at Starts With a Bang. Okay. And if you go to my Twitter account, you will find I reproduced the background illustration of his Twitter account, and he is dressed all in blue. His beard and his mustache have been dyed green. He's wearing a light blue bodysuit with wings on it or something. Perhaps this is My Little Pony related. And he has his mouth open as if he's snarling with his fists clenched. I am not inclined to listen to policy advice from a man who not only looks like Anton LaVey's more sinister brother, but is also an admitted fan of My Little Pony. But I suppose those are the people that we get now. I mean, you take a look at a picture of this fellow and you'll think this is a put on, right? He's a troll. But no, apparently he's a highly respected scientist who, no less than Scientific American, which used to be a highly regarded publication, invited to write a piece basically saying that people who refuse to take this virus should be proscribed from society. Matthew Carpenter says sassy queens in urban ghettos organized to steal the election dominion. The speculation that I've been reading is that it was assumed that the buggering about with the election machines would be sufficient, particularly, the weighting of the votes. But it would appear, if this, we can extrapolate from the weighting of the votes, that it seems that Trump may have got as many as 81 million popular votes. And so when the machines weren't sufficient to steal, they had to go back to the tried and true method of ballot stuffing. Multiple browser tabs open is a big memory hog. Well, I know that, which is why I only have as many tabs open for this show as I need to, which is why you see me, sort of disappearing to bring stories up. Because here's what I do, okay? That I spend a few hours, what do I want to talk about? Let's see what's interesting. And there's all these stories there. And so I have to make a decision what I'm going to talk about and what I'm not going to talk about. And so then when I decide, I come up with titles for the sections of the story and stories which are attached to them. And then I put them all in a Microsoft Word document, which I continually update every single day. Add a number to the date and add a number to the number of the show. We're up to, 197 now? And so I work from that. I have to have a certain number of tabs on the screen, but I suppose, I don't know, I hadn't cleared my cache or something. I think that's what might be what it was. But I'm going to return to this now, to my Microsoft Word document. Lord Lawson, who was a very, very clever man and was Chancellor of the Exchequer in Margaret Thatcher's cabinet, he was interviewed for the Daily Mail yesterday. And the 88-year-old, described as a climate denier, said, "I've never been more depressed about the future." A former Tory chancellor today claimed that Boris Johnson has initiated his hugely expensive green revolution now to distract the public from the pandemic. He called Number 10's drive to transform the UK economy absolutely mad and crazy. The 88-year-old climate denier cautioned against what he called the PM's suicidal commitment to going green at a time when the the UK economy enters the biggest recession in 300 years as a result of shutdown orders. He suggested that Johnson loves big projects irrespective of the cost and warned that the British people would ultimately be forced to bear the burden, which experts have estimated will take decades to deliver. Last month, the PM launched his £12 billion plan for the environment, pledging it would create 250,000 jobs and significantly slash Britain's carbon emissions. His more ambitious plans include a ban on new sales of petrol and diesel cars by 2030 and the installation of thousands of offshore wind turbines. But critics previously suggested that Downing Street's authoritarian program will come with an immense price tag at a time when the government is already borrowing record sums due to the coronavirus crisis. In an interview on the YouTube channel Trigonometry, Lord Lawson called greenery a new religion which has taken hold as Christianity has declined in the West. Whenever these politicians say, oh, yes, this is going to deliver 250,000 jobs. Oh, do you have a plant? Do you have plants there? Do you have all these jobs lined up? Right? You just go and sign up for your job? No, they're extrapolating based on the rosiest possible scenarios. Keep in mind, we are talking about, with this green power, something that has not been demonstrated to work at scale, whereas coal, oil, and gas have been proved to work at scale for hundreds of years. But no, we're just going to jump head first into this. Lawson said, "I think it is designed to take our minds off the pandemic. It's crazy. I think you have to see it to a certain extent in the psychology of Boris Johnson, who loves big projects irrespective of the cost. I've never been more depressed about the future of this country. I hope the government might come to its sense and abandon this plan, but it's absolutely a commitment they've made so far, but it's a suicidal commitment." Lord Lawson's 2006 book, An Appeal to Reason, a cool look at global warming, argued that global warming was occurring at a moderate rate and criticized alarmist politicians and scientists, warning of catastrophe without urgent action. The one-time chairman of the Global Warming Policy Foundation think tank, which promoted climate change skepticism, was accused of having pie-in-the-sky views on global warming by former Minister Sir Oliver Letwin. And I'm going to interject and say that Oliver Letwin is a terrible, terrible person. Lawson says, I think that climate change is not a threat. It's happening very gently at a fraction of a degree per decade, which is something we can perfectly well live with. The problem is this so-called strategy, the Green Industrial Revolution, is to move the work away from cheap, affordable, and reliable energy to extremely costly and unreliable energy, and to do so at an inordinate cost. The cost of moving from cheap and reliable energy to very expensive and unreliable energy is massive, and it's crazy. The biggest thing Johnson wants to move to is wind, which is hugely expensive and very unreliable. Wind people will tell you the costs, although they're high now, are coming down. That is totally untrue. They are, if anything, going up. So the burden for the British people of their energy costs, the cost for travel, the cost for heating their homes, every other cost involved in energy is going to increase substantially unless he has the sense to abandon this crazy plan. Now, what Johnson has done, and I guess what Justin Trudeau plans to do in Canada and Joe Biden plans to do in the United States, is to say, we can stop worrying about climate emergency because this plan is going to end that. Also, everyone's going to get a good job. Everyone is going to get a high-paying job. Wow. If it was that easy, one doesn't know why others did not come up with this plan earlier. No? Seems a bit of a mystery. Perhaps they were just too selfish and mean-spirited to do so. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. The World Health Organization's special envoy for the global COVID-19 response says that despite the arrival of a COVID-19 vaccine, normal life won't resume for at least 2 years. Dr. David Nabarro suggested that social distancing and masks were something that would have to continue as a way of treating this virus with respect. Again, with the pathetic fallacy. See, COVID-19 doesn't like to be dissed, okay? He explained that this will mean face masks and physical distancing, otherwise the virus does keep on surging. The reality is that it will be some months before we can dispense with these precautions. Oh, we, huh? When asked when things would return to normal, Nabarro suggested that this wouldn't occur until the end of 2022 at the earliest. I hate making predictions. Oh, I think he loved making this prediction. But let's just consider it in the big picture. None of us will be safe until the whole world is safe. And just, like, there is no justice for some unless there is justice for all. There's no contentment for some unless there is contentment for all. It has been the case throughout the history of the world that there are some places which are relatively safe. There are some places which are completely unsafe, and many places which are in the middle. And that is not going to change in the future. It is simply not going to change. Let's see. Many of us are pondering when things will return to normal, wrote World Economic Forum founder Klaus Schwab. The short response is never. Nothing will ever return to the broken sense of normalcy that prevailed prior to the crisis, because the coronavirus pandemic marks a fundamental inflection point in our global trajectory. Yes. So Andrew Cuomo and Anthony Fauci, welcome to the Andy and Tony Show. Kristen Taylor, a Gateway pundit, New York governor, and Dr. Anthony Fauci had a grand time laughing and joking during coronavirus briefing on Monday, with Cuomo saying he and Fauci are like the famous movie actors Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. As of Sunday, about 288,000 Americans were reported to have died from the COVID-19 China coronavirus. New York State has the most deaths in the nation at around 34,000. Let's see. There are 24 days until the end of the month. Joe Biden said that 400,000 Americans were going to be dead by the end of the year. So that would mean that 112,000 Americans would have to die in the next 24 days. It's not going to happen. I'm waiting for the media to constantly bring this up. Well, you're a COVID-19 alarmist, aren't you? You said 400,000. Well, no, but you said 400,000, and it is very short of 400,000. How do you explain your alarmism? Cuomo made the joke about being like the actors while talking to Fauci about the possibility of the two filming a vaccine. Let's see, Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. I was thinking more like Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. At the very least, Andrew Cuomo is a stone cold killer. Let's move into War on Christmas. CNN medical analyst, this is from Trent Baker at Breitbart, Dr. Leana Wen on Monday advised the American public to cancel their Christmas and New Year plans as a result of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. During an appearance on New Day, Wen voiced her concern that COVID-19 deaths and hospitalizations are still rising after Thanksgiving. Because of the Thanksgiving surge, she called on everyone to absolutely not gather indoors with anyone who is not in their immediate family for the upcoming Christmas and New Year holidays. The incubation period for COVID-19 is up to 14 days. The average is about 5 to 7 days. And so what that means is we had Thanksgiving and people returning from Thanksgiving about a week ago. So this week, we're going to see the impact of that Thanksgiving surge. I looked up Dr. Leana Wen, and she's from communist China. She's an immigrant from communist China. I don't want to harp on this. Actually, I do want to harp on this. That it seems that public health in North America has been taken over by people who are not old stock Americans or Canadians. And again, these people come from countries which have no conception whatsoever of liberty. They don't. It's irrelevant to them. The only things that count are power and money. So, does CNN have anything else for us in this regard? Dr. Saju Matu says that the only way back to normalcy is to forget about Christmas this year, is to forget about New Year's next year, and focus on the task ahead, which is hunkering down, waiting for the vaccines to come, and wearing that mask. No, I got a response on this from one of my correspondents on Twitter that the reporter, the blonde from CNN, because they're all blonde, aren't they? Bottle blondes, said, well, you see, I work in a kind of job where I frequently have to give up my holidays. Oh, because you're not important enough such that you get Christmas and New Year's off like the big boys, like Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon and whatever that gay robot's name is, Anderson Cooper. So yes, this is what we've heard from the media. You know, we've suffered, now it's your turn, except the media has not suffered. They have their jobs. And of course, would it be possible for CNN to come up with a public health expert who is in fact not a foreigner? It should be possible, right? I mean, they're not all foreigners. Oh, and we have angry women in Michigan politics. And one of them is the state attorney general, who is called Dana Nessel, who is a Democrat. Well, campaigning in Georgia this is from John Nolte at Breitbart. Well, campaigning in Georgia on behalf of two Republicans who appear to be in two tight U.S. Senate races that will determine control of that chamber, Trump said to his massive crowd, quote, "Let me begin by wishing you all a very Merry Christmas." Remember the word? Remember we started 5 years ago and I said you're going to be saying Christmas again and that we say it proudly again. And although they'll be trying to take that word out of the vocabulary, we're not going to let them do that, unquote. In a now deleted tweet, neurotic Dana Nessel completely freaked out. Quote, "I remember the first time I was at the store with my son, an employee said, 'Merry Christmas' to us. My son looked devastated and asked, 'Are we the only people who don't celebrate Christmas?' I answered, 'No, and we are just as American as everyone else.' Glad Joe Biden knows that." Nolte comments, does that make a lick of sense to you? Come on. Does anyone believe Nessel's son looked devastated after someone wished him a Merry Christmas? I certainly hope she's lying about that, because if she isn't, My heart breaks for a kid so sheltered, so soft, so unready for the real world that someone wishing him Merry Christmas devastates him. Something else doesn't pass the smell test. This part. I remember the first time I was at a store with my son, an employee said Merry Christmas to me. So the first time she was in a store with her son and someone wished them a Merry Christmas, the kid was old enough to articulate questions such as, are we the only people who don't celebrate Christmas? How sheltered is this kid is that he's never been hit with a Merry Christmas before then. And if you want to talk about sheltered, he's old enough to ask a question like that and still thinks his family is the only one that doesn't celebrate Christmas. See what I mean? True or not, leftists always put such big things in the minds of small children. Kids are kids. They have no wisdom, no real world experience. Children have nothing to teach us. From my experience, from the mouths of babes come lies and a lot of whining. Our job is to teach them. And was Nessel teaching her child if a Merry Christmas devastates him with a sense of alienation and otherness? What is she teaching her child? What is Dana Nessel teaching her child? Ethnic resentment. That is what she is teaching her child. Nolte continues, when I told my 6-year-old daughter about Nessel's tweet, she said, does it not unnerve you, Papa, that a state attorney general is attempting, and not in a subtle way, to shame those of us who hold the Christian faith into a form of secular silence and compliance? I trust, Father, that you have no plans to move us to the Wolverine state, for it reeks the kind of anti-Christian bigotry and intolerance we've not seen since Rome in the days of Nero. I have no idea where my daughter obtained that English accent. He says it's cry bullying 101. Now, I'm trying to remember the name of that Israeli author who wrote the book, much commented upon, about nationalism, which actually I reviewed, a year ago? A little more than that? He actually wrote in his book that if you are a Jew in America and you really cannot abide expressions of Christianity, such as Christmas, you should probably move to another country, as I did. He admits it, But Dana Nessel actually thinks that she's going to bully Americans out of celebrating Christmas because she and her child are outraged by this. The big mama in Michigan politics, the rubber-faced Governor Gretchen Whitmer, extended the 3-week coronavirus pause on Monday by 12 days and claimed hope is on the horizon. Yes, none of our other lockdowns have worked, but this one will. On November 15th, Whitmer announced the state was regressing despite her relentless coronavirus orders and shuttered in-person dining as well as in-person learning for high schoolers. She also restricted other activities such as group exercise classes, casinos, movie theaters, and bowling alleys. High school sports were canceled while professional and college athletics were not. Today, she said she was lengthening that pause. Whitmer recommended individuals wear masks consistently whenever they are inside with individuals not in their household and are recommended to pick only a small group to see you regularly. Given that a great many people, who gets infected by this? Typically, you have to spend time with these people. Who do you spend the most time with? Your family. That's who. I don't really understand. There's no consistency here. Oh, well, you don't have to wear the masks. You can have your family over, but your family, apart from hospitals, families are the most dangerous places for a disease that's really not that dangerous unless you're over 80 or a lard ass. But never mind that. Hope is on the horizon, Whitmer said, but we need an additional 12 days to determine the full impact of the Thanksgiving holiday on our efforts to mitigate the spread of the virus. This is all about protecting our families and frontline workers until we eradicate this virus once and for all. Has she considered nuclear weapons? Perhaps some of these pulse weapons that I'm hearing so much of these days after that assassination in Iran. Maybe that would work. Oh, you want to talk about futility? Let's talk a little bit more about futility. And here we go. And we're going to go to New Mexico. This is from Griff Witt. That is actually the person's name, apparently, Griff Witt. The Washington Post. New Mexico shut down nearly everything to keep hospitals from being overwhelmed by COVID. It wasn't enough. The governor had been sounding the alarm for more than a month, but by mid-November, it was clear to Michelle Lujan Grissom that she would need to take extreme measures to head off the most serious emergency that New Mexico has ever faced. With COVID-19 cases rising exponentially and hospital beds dwindling, she dragged her state back to the darkest days of spring, when restaurant dining was banned, non-essential, ho-ho, businesses were closed, and residents were ordered to stay inside unless absolutely necessary. She hoped it might be enough to avert catastrophe. New Mexico has crushed this virus before, twice. She told her state's 2 million citizens, we're going to do it again. How stupid is this woman? They crushed the virus, but then when they stopped punishing people by destroying society and destroying the economy, the virus comes roaring back. I guess that's how viruses act. I came across this piece from last year. How does a social isolation affect a child's mental health and development? The absence of social relationships and behaviors have been shown to affect child development in various ways. For example, previous research has revealed that socially isolated children tend to have lower subsequent educational attainment, tend to be of a less advantaged social class in adulthood, and are more likely to be psychologically distressed in adulthood. This is from a study by Lacey, Komari, and Bartley, 2014. This text will focus on how long-term social isolation is closely related to loneliness and physiological illness, and how it affects a healthy development of the brain. If a person is not able to experience the necessary level of social contact and behavior, they can experience social isolation. Social relationships are critical to the maintenance of health, and a lack of them often correlates with feelings of loneliness. This is from Doan and Adam, 2010. Loneliness, in turn, has been linked to higher levels of stress. The primary function of the human stress response is to protect the body from the environment. When a person is socially isolated, as it is a basic human need, the body will perceive the situation as a threat. During the time of the active stress response, the brain will release multiple stress hormones to protect the body from danger. The release of these hormones is needed for the person to react towards the current stress factor and resist the possible harm. However, the body cannot release these stress hormones and protect the body from stressful situations for unlimited time. Having an active stress response over an extended period has been proven to increase the risk of developing cardiovascular disease, elevated blood pressure, infectious illness, cognitive deterioration, and mortality. These are physiological consequences of being prone to stress over time, and they are typically experienced in adulthood. High levels of stress are therefore regarded as a threat to a socially isolated child's health, not only in their early years of life, but also in adulthood. As argued, socially isolated children are at increased risk of health problems in adulthood. Furthermore, studies on social isolation have demonstrated that a lack of social relationships negatively impacts the development of the brain's structure. In extreme cases of social isolation, studies of young mice and monkeys have shown how the brain is strongly affected by a lack of social behavior and relationships. This is from a study by McKinnon, Rosen, Ito, and Korfas in 2012. The studies described in this text demonstrate the importance of social interaction and how social isolation damages not only the physiological functions of the body, but also the development of the nervous system support cells, which in turn affects the development of cognitive functioning. However, there are reasons to believe that the human need for social interaction is not only the risk factor, but it's also the life-saving factor. As previously mentioned, when the human stress response is activated, multiple stress hormones are activated. One of the hormones that are released has the function to force us into social contact. As the need for social connection is important to everyone in a vulnerable situation, this contact is so important that our body forces us to socialize. And this is a study which you can find at the website noisolation.com. No, but we've just decided we're just going to keep on crushing this virus until what? Until everyone is an alcoholic or a drug addict or has developed some sort of mental illness or has committed suicide or murder. Because apparently, in our consideration of the policies to combat, just straight back against COVID-19, the fact that we are isolating people, men, women, and children, with quite possible, very serious, profound, even catastrophic consequences has not even been considered. This has not even been considered. I'm going to look at Jonathan Barr at Lockdown Skeptics now. Oh, yes. Vaccination cards. Apparently the NHS has already got them ready, or a mock-up of them ready, both sides of it. Apparently this is going to be, in the United States as well, and in Canada. Of course, they could always pass laws forbidding businesses to reject people who do not have these cards. And it's already been joked, and I already joked about it. I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago. There's a illicit business in government IDs for drinking purposes. There is going to be an enormous business in illicit vaccination cards. Absolutely enormous. Immunity passports, an idea gaining ground. As countries look to ease restrictions, the idea of an immunity passport is gaining ground, says Travel Pulse. It might seem counterintuitive that instead of needing a negative COVID-19 test to cross international borders, you could only offer proof that you previously tested positive. Yet these so-called immunity passport policies already exist in several countries. There is obvious potential for momentum to grow behind the idea, not least as the International Air Transport Association announced not so long ago that is in the final development stage of its mobile app, the IATA Travel Pass, which is designed to enable flyers to display their COVID credentials when asked. More travel madness. Avoid layovers in Doha. Yeah, well, I couldn't be dragged to that place kicking and screaming, so I'm not going to worry about that. The Boris menu. Bureaucracies regulate and entrepreneurs make things happen. Behold the Boris menu from The Independent. A hot dog and chips for a mere £1.99 is the best-selling item on the Castle Inn pub's Boris menu, launched by owner Kerry Hills to stay in line with the government's latest COVID-19 regulations. Pubs under Tier 2 restrictions in England that primarily sell drinks can operate only if they serve a, quote, substantial meal, unquote, with orders of alcohol. But what constitutes a substantial meal remains murky, with government ministers seemingly unclear on whether or not a Scotch egg would constitute a starter or a main. In order to get through the ongoing restrictions, wet-led establishments like the Castle Inn in Tring, Hertfordshire, have begun offering cheap food and snacks in a bid to stay open. Ms. Hills tells The Independent, 90% of my customers are tradesmen who come in after work for 2 or 3 pints on their way home. They do not want anything to eat bar a bag of peanuts as they have dinner home with their families. The pub's Boris menu includes starters of garlic bread and soup for 99p, main courses or baked beans on toast, hot dogs and chips or tomato and mozzarella pizza bread for £1.99 and 99p desserts. I needed to make the menu as cheap as possible so as not to deter them from coming in at all. Due to the limited kitchen facilities at the pub, I also needed quick, simple dishes. The customers have responded really well, and so far the hot dog and chips has been the winning dish by far. Oh, let's see, in the Telegraph, Madeline Grant. On the public health establishment's dystopian logic, every flu season should bring another lockdown. Please, please don't give them any ideas. Don't. Just don't. Although, on the other hand, if you're what they call an accelerationist, I guess you should be cheering this sort of thing on. Let's look at Alex Berenson. He has a piece in the Wall Street Journal Opinion, COVID and the New Age of Censorship. Perspective, Washington Post, COVID-19 hospitalization rates are dropping. That's terrible. Well, no, wait a minute. That's terrible news. As beds fill up, people who need hospital care for the virus or something else can't get in. Is there any conceivable news that would be good news to the Washington Post? Berenson responds, this little bit of panic porn is, how do I put it politely, crap. No surprise, as Ashishka, who has been one of the great panic porners of COVID, he's no dinger, but then who is? The proof is in the field hospitals, the empty field hospitals. And this is a piece by Ashish K. Jha, MD, MPH. Again, someone from Asia, because they're the only people who know anything about medicine, it would seem. Jordan Schachtel had written on Substack, everyone is wearing a mask, they just don't work. Americans have exceeded universal masking benchmarks, but it has not slowed or stopped the spread. And Berenson comments, fact check, true. The data is stunning. 97% mask compliance in San Francisco, New York, DC, 96% in Miami and Philly, 95% in Chicago. Cloth and surgical masks do not work, period. But apparently they are patriotic, that they show that we care. Yes, by suffocating ourselves. Let's see. A sinister piece by Stuart Bell at Global News, and is illustrated with a very strange video, which I'm not going to click on, showing a man wearing what appears to be a military uniform and devil's horns coming out of his forehead. And he's holding up a flag that says, trust us or else. And there is a virus or some such thing being drilled into a skull. Oh, and Donald Trump is in the background. So this supposedly happened in the White House. Of course, it didn't. Neo-Nazis, extremists capitalizing on COVID-19, declassified CSIS documents. Say CSIS is the Canadian equivalent of the CIA. Extremist groups have been promoting disinformation about COVID-19 in an attempt to capitalize on the pandemic, according to declassified Canadian intelligence files obtained by Global News. Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and anti-government extremists in particular have been using COVID-19 conspiracy theories to attract followers, raise money, and encourage violence, the document said. A secret national security brief prepared for senior Canadian officials and shared with foreign governments links disinformation about the virus to what it calls ideologically motivated, violent IMV extremists. How many of such people are in Canada? Does CSIS estimate? No, not a word. Not a word. What counts as extremist, by the way? That say you're suspicious of the government response to COVID-19? I will remind listeners and viewers that within 12 months, all the health authorities of the world said that COVID-19 was not a danger. They all said that. They said not to worry with masks. We were encouraged to congregate together at Chinese New Year and the last. And then, oh no, we're all going to die. But wait a minute, the people who are dying are in their 80s, or they have significant, usually several significant comorbidities. But yeah, extremist COVID-19 propaganda, for example, blames Jews, China, immigrants, the government, and societal elites for the pandemic. It said, are there really people going around blaming the Jews for this? I know certainly people are blaming China. And I suppose immigrants from China or travelers from China might be blamed for it. The government and the social elites, well, they have destroyed our countries. They have. But I suppose we're not to talk about that. According to Friends, an activist who committed suicide in a horrible manner believed that COVID-19 shutdown was an establishment conspiracy plot ostensibly to strip Canadians of their rights and freedoms. We have been stripped of our rights and freedoms, but that is never in these stories. It's like, oh, these people carrying on about us being stripped of our Rights and freedoms. Oh, Christmas is over. New Year's is over. You can't go anywhere. The state of California has been completely shut down. But no, don't mention any of that. It added that some right-wing extremists were discouraging their followers from spreading COVID-19 conspiracies and instead wanted them to promote panic in order to accelerate the demise of the current social order. Projection.txt. Who's been spreading panic? Who's been saying that we're all going to die, that everyone is a direct physical threat to us? Well, that would be the elite. That would be the governments, wouldn't it? Oh, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, ethno-nationalists, draw on new followers and resources. What resources? Oh, and here's an example of a terrifying thing. There's some sort of pamphlet or something that says COVID-19 comes from China, and then multiculturalism kills. Well, COVID-19 does come from China. A key theme of COVID-19 conspiracies in the US and to a lesser degree in Canada is that the government will use the pandemic to impose martial law and target gun owners. Well, there is effective martial law many places in the United States, and Joe Biden has made it clear that he is declaring war on gun owners in the United States. Far-right figures have also been appearing at Toronto anti-lockdown rallies in recent weeks. Why don't you name one? Huh? Why don't you give us one name, Stuart Bell? Because apparently there are several. And maybe you could explain the significance of these people and why they are so dangerous. But that is not the aim of the Canadian media. The aim of the Canadian media is just to, spread squid ink and then say, don't ask questions. Asking questions is troublesome and perhaps soon illegal. The government knows what is best for you, and so just leave it at that. So who's on board with the Great Reset? Well, we know that Joe Biden is, we know that Justin Trudeau is, we know that Boris Johnson is, and Pope Francis, of course he is. He tweeted on December the 3rd, to help our society to build back better, and those words are in quotations, inclusion of the vulnerable must also entail efforts to promote their active participation in what? You had a lot more characters there you could have been used. He was ratioed, as the kiddies like to say, pretty hard for this. The Catholic Church used to have its own ideas on social order. Now, he could go back to those, but he wouldn't, for the reason that the Catholic Church had taken a very strong position against communism, against socialism, but also against the laissez-faire capitalism of the late 19th century in America and Britain, for instance. And make no mistake, the World Economic Forum is advocating communism. Imagine no possessions. That's what they're saying. By 2030, no possessions and no privacy either. They're saying it openly. Hundreds of San Diego teachers voluntarily attend white privilege training, where they're told to accept the U.S. is built on stolen land and asked to commit to becoming anti-racist. It's built on stolen land. So many of the people who are benefiting from this personally and browbeating Americans are, in fact, not historic Americans themselves. So if colonialism is a bad thing, shouldn't these people leave immediately? Black Lives Matter, it turns out, is not very popular in Britain, at least not with football fans. You are not welcome. This is from the Daily Mail. You are not welcome at our club. Colchester tells fans who boo players taking the knee to hand in their season's tickets for a refund after supporters jeered the BLM gesture at their first game back inside stadiums. Colchester owner Robbie Cowling has told fans who want to boo players taking the knee they are not welcome at the club. I'd like to see them remove them during a game. I'd very much like to see that. Colchester beat Grimsby in Saturday's League Two clash, but that victory was overshadowed by a number of fans booing the players' anti-racism gesture before kickoff. Is this an anti-racism gesture? I'd say it's more of a racial supremacy gesture. Millwall fans also booed players taking the knee ahead of their 1-0 home loss to Derby, leading Wayne Rooney to condemn their disgraceful and mindless behavior. Wayne Rooney is not in any position to condemn anyone for disgraceful and mindless behavior. New Colchester chairman and owner Cowling has urged those who want to keep booing the pre-match gesture not to return. Get this. It is undeniable that Black and other ethnic minority people are still the victims of racism. Okay, I understand that. And the Black footballers and staff at Colchester United feel that they are in a position of privilege. What? That has been fought for through the blood and sweat of their ancestors. A position that in 2020 the average Black person is still not afforded. He's a moron. Okay. Black footballers and staff at Colchester feel they're in a position of privilege. Well, that means they're superior to others. That has been fought for through the blood and sweat of their ancestors. What? Is he talking about the British Empire? Is that what he's talking about? Because what does that have to do with young Black men in Britain being paid absolute fortunes to kick a ball around on a field? And more from that poor, benighted country. There's a comedian called Dawn French who's been around for a long time, and she is popular. I've never found her funny in the slightest. James Delingpole writes on Blackboard, "The Vicar of Dibley, the BBC comedy show designed to reassure viewers that Christianity has nothing whatsoever to do with faith, religion, or belief in God, has embraced Black Lives Matter. If I recall correctly, Dawn French was for several years married to a Black comedian called Lenny Henry. Yes, they were married for 26 years. Okay, so back to the show. In one of these specials, Christmas specials, she takes the knee and delivers a sermon on Black Lives Matter. According to the Mail, while acknowledging that Dibley, a fictional village in Oxfordshire, is not the most ethnically diverse community, boo, she says, I don't think it matters where you're from. The whole point of Black Lives Matters is that is the most important thing in the world, where you are from, if that place is originally Africa. I don't think it matters where you're from. I think it matters that you do something about it because Jesus would, wouldn't he? Warming to her theme, she adds, until all lives matter the same, we are doing something very wrong. We need to focus on justice for a huge chunk of our countrymen and women who seem to have a very bad, weird deal from the day they're born. That's not what they thought when they came to Britain, and it's not what their parents or grandparents thought when they left places like Jamaica to move to Britain, because they got more money and they lived in a place which was far better ordered than, say, Jamaica was, let alone former African colonies. But let's just leave aside all that. The vicar then walks to the parish notice board and removes two posters, one about decimalization, the other relating to a missing button. I'm going to extrapolate here that the joke is that no one pays any attention to the notice board at this fictional church, because decimalization has stopped being controversial. It stopped being controversial in Britain decades ago. A missing button. You see how parochial and stupid these people are? That, someone loses a button and thinks, well, perhaps I might get some assistance in getting that button back. These people need more diversity. They need it good and hard. In what will be interpreted by some as a reference to the removal of statues of colonial figures linked to the slave trade, she says, I think that in Dibley, perhaps we should think about taking down some of these old notices like this and that, and perhaps we should put up one like this instead. She then pins a homemade Black Lives Matter poster to the notice board before taking the knee. If this comedy skit sounds about as funny as Ebola and about as authentically Christian as a pentacle with a sacrificed goat in the middle, that's probably because it was co-written by Richard Curtis, excruciatingly woke author of some of the most nauseatingly PC movies ever made, including Love Actually and the even worse The Girl in the Cafe. Don French. I don't want to talk anymore about Don French. So in more woke news, the popular singer of O Canada at the Vancouver Canucks hockey games says he knew he might lose his job for standing up against what he describes as the tyranny of COVID-19 restrictions. Mark Donnelly sang the anthem at an event called the Christmas Freedom Rally in Vancouver on Saturday, where hundreds of people protested restrictions imposed by BC's provincial health officer. Vancouver Canucks owner Francesco Aquilini tweeted late Friday that Connolly was now the former Canucks anthem singer, followed by the hashtag wear a mask. Donnelly told the crowd, many of whom weren't wearing masks or social distancing, that he decided to sing because he questions the draconian lockdown protocols. What was originally sold as a 15-day hunkering down sprint for the common good has turned into a 10-month marathon from hell, where the finish line is constantly being moved further into the distance. I must say I like this fellow. As someone known for singing our great national anthem, I'm standing up against what I feel is tyranny, plain and simple. But the owner of the Canucks very smugly just rushed to the belief that he would be cheered to the rafters for firing this fellow, and he was getting no more than 50% on Twitter for this. What do we know about this fellow, Francesco Aquilini? This is from Wikipedia. In May 2019, it was found that the Aquilini family had underpaid 174 migrant workers at their berry farm in Pitt Meadows. That's outside Vancouver. The Office of the Director of Employment Standards ordered the Aquilinis to pay back $133,632 in back wages, vacation pay, and interest to temporary foreign workers brought in from Guatemala to work at its Golden Eagle blueberry farm in the summer of 2018. Oh, so this fellow's company, it wasn't sufficient to bring in foreigners from Guatemala here. And the reason you bring in foreigners is because you're paying them almost nothing. But then it was decided that almost nothing was too much for these hapless Central Americans. But he's very firm on mask wearing. So, swings and roundabouts. From The Guardian. More than 1,200 Google employees and more than 1,500 academic researchers are speaking out in protest after a prominent Black scientist studying the ethics of artificial intelligence. That sounds really scientific. The ethics of artificial intelligence. You know what that means? Is that there have been a number of very embarrassing situations where artificial intelligence has been going through the data, and it comes to kind of embarrassing presumptions about some people. And this has to be fixed, manually, I guess. And there have been some very embarrassing incidents where prominent Black females that artificial intelligence has judged to be males. Timnit Gebru, who was the tactical co-lead of Google's ethical AI team, wrote on Twitter Wednesday that she had been fired after sending an email to an internal group for women and allies working at the company's AI unit. The email, which was first published by the tech newsletter Platformer, referenced a dispute over a research paper, but more broadly expressed frustration at Google's diversity programs. In it, Gebru argued that there is zero accountability or real incentive for Google leadership to change. Your life gets worse when you start advocating for underrepresented people. You start making the other leaders upset. There's no way more documents or more conversations will achieve anything. Well, why not just give up then. Were we really supposed to believe that Google is some sort of fanatical, white, patriarchal organization where no, change, we have resisted change, all sorts of change from the very beginning, and we are not going to start embracing it now? And Missy, if you don't agree with this, well then I suggest that we go our separate ways. Gebru is one of the most well-known and respected Black female scientists working in AI. Is there a long list? Before joining Google, she co-authored the widely cited 2018 paper that found higher error rates in facial analysis technology for women with darker skin tones. The dispute over Gebru's research arose in November when a senior manager at Google told her that she would have to either retract or remove her name from a paper she had co-authored. The paper, co-authored by researchers inside and outside Google, contended that technology companies could do more to ensure AI systems aimed at mimicking human writing and speech do not exacerbate historical gender biases and use of offensive language, according to a draft copy seen by Reuters. I'm reminded of the management consultant in Mike Judge's Office Space. What is it that you think you do here? What exactly was this woman's job? She was sort of the titular goddess of I don't know what, gender neutral or gender correct artificial intelligence. And of course she's not an American, is she? According to Wikipedia, Gebru was born and raised in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Her father and her two older sisters are electrical engineers. Her father died when she was 5 years old, and she was raised by her mother. Her mother and father originated from Eritrea. She escaped potential forced deportation to Eritrea by the Ethiopian government in the late 1990s and traveled to Ireland. But I guess that wasn't gender affirmative enough. So she had to come to the United States. You know, Google and these companies are full of women like this who are described as scientists or computer programmers and coders. They are nothing of the sort. Oh, and just a terrible example of discrimination from Canada. It's almost, brings tears to one's eyes. It's about a woman that I had noticed and probably quoted on this show. She was a talk show host, and she wrote a column for Global News. Supriya Dwivedi. She has, according to Shri Paradkar, the Toronto Star, she has resigned from her high-profile job as the host of AM6 Morning News after an unending barrage of hate mail finally culminated in a rape threat to her infant. There were emails that said, "Go back to your country, you dumb," etc., etc. Just want to bring Sharia law to Canada. Yes, some very serious insults here. As demoralizing as a lot of those emails were, Supriya Dwivedi told listeners on November 27th, it was different when I was the focal point and my husband was the focal point. It's really different when someone starts to target your kid. So this is my last show. And then there's a bunch of facts and figures about women saying that they had experienced online abuse. And it has been my experience that with very little exaggeration, most women consider a disagreement to be online abuse. So why did she quit? I mean, she had essentially two jobs. She was an on-air host, and she wrote editorials, reasonably remunerative, I would have thought. The argument that she's making is that the radio station did not do enough to protect her. She didn't feel she was being taken seriously by her employer, and she filed a complaint against Chorus Entertainment, which owns Global News at the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Chorus has not taken steps to address the underlying systemic issue that has set me up to receive these messages. They have not put in place or enforced editorial standards that require hosts to make sure that their views are supported by facts. Oh, she has a disagreement with what other people on the station say, and they shouldn't be allowed to say things she disagrees with. Nor have they required hosts to correct the record following any false statements they make. Now, she hasn't been protected enough. Well, okay. She could take her Twitter feed private, and she could stop advertising her email address, which she did at the bottom of her column, or she could, get a new email address. Okay, if you're going to, I have not suffered the, abuse comparable to what this woman has, although I have had many, many occasions, and people said that I should kill myself, or wish for my death, or wish for my imminent death, etc., 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 about and all of the usual stuff about being old and ugly and a loser, etc., etc. Goes with the territory. Goes with the territory. And the more controversial you are, and the bigger the audience you have, the more unpleasant the response is going to be. There are many unpleasant people out there looking to do unpleasant things. When I was in talk radio, we had bomb threats against my station. We had threats of violence against my host. All prominent people in life get threats. And to argue that this is a female problem is simply false. There's no other way to describe it. And, oh yes, I already talked about. I'm going to talk about movies tomorrow in a general way. Steve Saylor has written a bunch of columns. The question of what kind of movies females like versus males, and also how different personality types like different types of movies. I meant to speak about that today, but did not get around to it, perhaps because of the interruption in my broadcast, for which I apologize. But let's take a final look at the chat. Metal Mike, Wallace scolded the Republicans for not saying president-elect, and he made a point to say it numerous times on Sunday. It's so sad. It's just so very sad. Popcasso 88, how could a commie like Brennan get any job in the U.S. government? Well, apparently he brought it up front, and in his telling, the CIA was looking for diversity. Well, not ethnic diversity, unless you consider Irish to be diverse in that respect. But, I don't know, intellectual diversity? Che Blutarsky says one big comorbidity was going to a New York hospital in April where they put you on a ventilator so you'd stop exhaling the virus, even though this generally killed you. Enron says, Kevin, did you find John Sessions funny? I saw he died recently. I don't know that I'm familiar with that name. Yeah, look, the hospitals, all this talk of frontline workers and heroes. We now know that the hospitals are the most dangerous place to be for COVID-19. Now, hospitals have been a dangerous place, well, since forever, I suppose. No, just all their struggles, and they're doing so much, and they're just putting their lives on the line. They cannot seem to be able to stop people in their care from being infected with COVID-19. They seem to be really crummy at it. William Stewart says Yoram Hazony. That's exactly right. He's the fellow who said that, if you're living in America and, Christmas, to give one example, offends you so much, you should find another place to live. Alex DeLarge was first. Yes, you get the gold medal there. William Hicks says the virus would probably spread like crazy if we used nukes. It's outsmarted us at every term. Time to face facts. COVID-19 is an evil genius. Greetings to you, Hikmah warrior. Not isolating from the wrong people can also be harmful. Selective isolation is a healthy instinct. I isolate from SJWs, women's lib, and femtards. Okay, yeah, I understand that. I think we have far too much talk of that. It is good for people, I don't know, to have to exercise manners, to control themselves, and more to the point, to associate with people once in a while, at the very least, with people with whom they wouldn't necessarily associate. Because it's getting quite frightening, the extent to which people live in niches now. And the niche is based around, I live this kind of lifestyle, I am this kind of person, these are my political beliefs, or This is the media I consume. So that's the show for today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be exceedingly appreciated this time because I have to be out of this place by the end of the month, and I don't know where I'm going. So that's the situation I'm in. If you'd like to make a donation, my PayPal account is at kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, a donation can be made directly via Interac at shaw.ca. And briefly, what is coming up on the show this week? On December the 10th on Theater Thursday, I'm going to be talking about Michael Mann's film from 1986, Manhunter. And on the book club Friday, the next day, I am going to be discussing the 3 World War II novels, North Castle to Castle and Rigadoon, written by Louis Ferdinand Céline. And I, as always, leave you with this benediction in these days of social isolation and civilizational collapse. I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, managed to form a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.